Hey, family, good evening, and welcome to another installment of this thing we call Relevant Conversations. With me, I'm your host, John Selders, and I am happy to be back with you. It's been a little bit since we have done these on what we call a weekly basis. I have had some life shiftings and changes that have gone on. And want to just make one word and say thank you for all of your well wishes, your prayers, your support of us through this time. Continue to do so, and bless you, and bless you again. Listen, it's been our hope, our vision to maintain a space in this cyber world of having interesting conversations, interesting discourses and dialogues about a number of things. And of course, since I'm the host, I get to talk about what I want to talk about. And that's the way you do it. When it's your show, you get to do that. And in this context, I have had over the last number of weeks, months, and even years to be in dialogue with folk who I enjoy, folk who are brilliant in their own rights, folk who are opinionated, folk who are in lots of ways, and however you slice it, there is some interesting folk. This young man that agreed to chop it up with me tonight is somebody I care about deeply. I love this young man. I'm calling him young. He ain't that young no more. He ain't that young no more. He's moving toward that middle. I love this brother. He is somebody who when I want to know something, and somebody that's going to tell me some truth, and tell me the truth, whether I'm going to like it or not. You know, you got some folk that around you, they only tell you the truth that they think, you're going to like. Well, this brother doesn't necessarily tell me the truth that I'm going to like. He just tell me his version of the truth. And that's what I appreciate, because I don't have to like it or not. He's going to say what it is that he thinks, because he knows I'm asked and I'm asking to tell me, for him to tell me what he thinks. And he's done a lot of things. It was hard for me to name or narrow down. Some folk are just, you can say they are this thing, such and such, and they do this. Well, this brother do so many different kinds of things. So what I had to say is he's part entrepreneur, he's part business man, and I'm saying it just like we said in the vernacular, business man. He's part that. He is part activist. He's part educator. he's certainly, he lives his life as an organizer. I mean, even in his business, he's organizing, and he gonna tell you he retired, but he ain't. He can't do it. He can't do it. And he is both a friend and brother and family to me. Can I just bring him into the room and have him greet you? This is Brother Kennard Ray. He is his mama's favorite son.
Her only one. So it worked out pretty good. Thank you, Bishop. Thank you. I love you too. I was gonna say your intro for me was the best ever, but it started out really good and kind of dipped. You called me interesting, opinionated, and then young, and I exploded, and then you say he's not so young no more. So I gotta accept that. I gotta accept that the grades are showing, but I'm happy to be here today. Thank you so much.
You are welcome, first off, and welcome to this platform. You're not new to being here with us. You have, in fact, let me be upfront and a little confessional. It was words that you said to me some time ago that made a tipping point in us doing this on a regular basis. You said to me, Bishop, folk need to hear from you what you think, how you are rapping, how you are framing stuff. It is it's, you said to me, and this is what I remember, and this is what I held on to, that spoke to me after many days later. We are all better informed when you are sharing what you think, and I appreciate that. It was something that was life-giving for me, but it also helped me to say, okay, let's do this on a regular basis. Let's commit to the time it takes and the resources, that the human resources in particular, that it takes to do this. And I appreciate you, brother, for all that you bring. From the very moment I met you many years ago now, when you were a little bit younger, and a little bit younger, and you wasn't so gray, and I think you might have had a little piece of hair on top of your head, a little piece.
Kind of, sort of. We pulled them together a little. We pulled some pieces together.
Right, you had a little piece of stuff on your head, and and I appreciate you with all of the different things and what you've allowed me to do, and I've been blessed by it. You've allowed me to walk with you through life these many years, and I'm blessed and privileged to do so. You've walked with me as well, and my family, and I appreciate you so much. Okay, so that's the end of the Love Fest. We might reference it from time to time throughout this next little bit of time, but what I wanted to do, I you know this, we were talking a little bit earlier. I was like, who could I? And I often do this to you. You know this. I'll say, okay, who out there? And then I'll ask the question, who is this? Blah, 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 blah. And you said, ooh.
It was tough.
I said, well, I think you got it, bro. I think it's me and you. And we could just talk about nothing and everything.
Voluntold to come do some
stuff. No. But you and I can just have conversation about whatever it is we want to have conversation about. But what I wanted to do, this is in Connecticut. It is election primary eve for municipalities. It is the eve of municipal elections here in the state of Connecticut, and I've been an advocate. You have too, for us. When I say us, anybody and everybody participating in the political process at its most basic and local level, and so. I wanted just to have some, few moments to talk about the municipal primary that's going on in the state. Chop it up a little bit about some of the races, and then have a kind of broad, overarching conversation about how we participate and how we come to this moment in a participatory way. And so I appreciate you saying yes, and why don't we dive in? You and I live in Hartford, and there are races.
Start.
Yeah, there are races in other of our major towns and cities here in Connecticut. Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, New London, and of course all of our towns in one way or another, vis-a-vis having primaries for mayor or first select person, town council. Sometimes they're running by whole slates, so each municipality has a different kind of version of what that looks like. Here, it really is about who gets to be mayor. And in a city like Hartford, we're really a one mayor town. And let me rephrase.
One party town.
One party town. And so typically speaking, and over the last 40, 50, 60 years, it's been Democratic. I'd say it goes back even further than that, but let's say just safely the last 50, 60 years, that's been the case. The winner of the Democratic primary also becomes the winner of the general election. Absolutely. So here we are. And here in Connecticut, for those of you who are watching us from all over the country, here in Connecticut, what happens here is that the town committees
Bishop, you there?
Yeah, there I am. Here I am. I don't know what's going on. We got a little internet's difficulty, but so let me repeat. The town committee meets in convention, and they decide who they endorse for the party, each party, committee, etc. And so we have that here. If you are able to get enough signatures, and typically it also means if you have enough money to run a campaign, you can get yourself by petition on the ballot for both the primary and the general election in some cases. So, and I think in this case, we may have that going on. I think regardless to what the primary yields, we may still have another candidate or two in this that may claim to be Democratic or even independent. I know that there is a Republican on the ballot on the other side. So here we are. What's your initial comments and thought about our primary battle and the municipal elections in general?
Yeah, I just first I really like how you presented that and kind of gave us a summary of what it really is coming into these elections, because in a single party town, single party city for the most part, and what we mean by single party is one party is the majority, no matter how many, essentially a super majority. It doesn't matter how many Republicans are in the city, how many registered working families people are registered in the city. Ultimately, Democrats outnumber, any other party by a significant enough number for the primary to effectively be the election, right? And so when I think about that in itself, I think about flaws in our system, right? In our democracy, because as long as the way that parties and interested candidates begin to work when you're in a party dominant city, is you start to work within prime universes. A prime universe being, voters who have voted again and again and again and again, in a certain number of elections. So, me as a political operative, campaign manager, whatever you want to put it, in the years where I've um, successfully managed candidates to victories, and oftentimes it was from with working in a prime universe system. If you're working in a prime universe system in a single party dominant municipality, that means for the most part, you're only contacting members of that party. But not only are you contacting solely members of that party, but now you've primed them down, right, to people who are the most active. And the way that that hurts our communities is if there's an issue that's particularly outstanding to let's just say youth, right, or other new voters in that particular municipality, then the chances are, if they haven't voted in 3 out of the 4 last elections, let's say, because a lot of times it's how things are primed. You look at how many times has this person voted in the last 4 elections, and sometimes depending on how close the race is, or how much money the candidate has to spend, you'll say, well, we'll narrow it down to the last 4 municipal elections. If you got a little bit of money to spend and maybe the race isn't so tight, or is so tight you need more people, you'll say, well, let's broaden it out to the last 4 elections, including gubernatorials and federals, right? So you build out this very, very most likely to vote group of voters to then deliver your message to, right? You send your mail to them, you knock their doors if they're accessible, you call them on the phone. Meanwhile, because of Prime Universe, in a city like Hartford, for a primary election that only includes, one party, the Prime Universe can be as small as 2,500 people, right? So if you have these people or less, I mean, it can be very small. I'm pretty sure there's going to be, I'm not going to put any prediction on it, but a significant number of people to come out and vote tomorrow, even though Hartford has statistically and traditionally over the last decade plus been the poorest turnout city, right? The least voters of all cities comes out in Hartford. But in saying that, again, if there are issues that affect young voters, new voters, just for instance, they're not going to get that contact because they may be, again, a newly registered member of that party, right? When it's a single party, and Hartford has been, the Democratic Party, or B, they may not, even if they've been participating in one way or another, they may not be connected to the system in which the Democratic town committees can recognize them as a voter. So to answer that main question, what my feelings are about that, or about what's coming up tomorrow, at 6 a.m. when the polls open. I mean, the first thing again is I'm troubled. I think that working within these prime universes, these small, just not to jargon it too much, these small groups of voters within the entire group of voters, this very, very small group of voters within the entire group of this single party, right, group of voters, which I think, hovers around the number of Democrats in Hartford. We have 125,000 people. The number of Democrats I think it hovers around 60,000 or something like that, 67,000. The Independent Party is a party in Connecticut. So we say, when we talk about people who aren't registered any particular party, we call them unaffiliated. I think we have a pretty high number of unaffiliated people, but just imagine if, the rest of those people in the single party, I mean, the large number, the people who don't vote in every election, because that's pretty common. Again, we have the lowest turnout in the state. Just imagine if these people who may have the biggest issues got some contact from the candidates, right? Just imagine if they had some level of engagement, some form of education about the race and the people in it before it popped up on them, right? So that's what I think about when I think about tomorrow's election to start, because we again the winner is going to be determined tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing to me. I've been here 20 plus years now, and it was quite a shock in a city, in a town like Hartford, 125,000 population, give or take, a few thousand on one end or the other. Probably somewhere between 70 to 80,000 folks are eligible to vote. The last mayoral election, the mayor won that election with around, I'm gonna be liberal, 7,000 votes. That shocked me. In the elections with President Obama, the presidential elections, typically we get bigger turnout when elections are held during presidential elections. Here in the state of Connecticut, our municipal elections are not ever during those times. We have these off year elections, and like it or lump it, that's the way it is here in Connecticut. We have such low turnout, and let's be clear, Hartford is the lowest, but Bridgeport, New Haven, and the other cities are pretty low in relationship to the actual population. Right. So for me, these elections seem to be much more about popularity. And they are actually about the issues that any one of us or any groups of us would actually be concerned about. It's name recognition, but more importantly, who I know. Now, for example, in the election here in Hartford, what was said and rumored around, and then it was reported that one of our candidates actually got the party's endorsement because they actually served on that same body for a number of years, prior in the lead up to this now primary election, and never with a thought about or even any commentary about what they saw as a vision. What would they do differently? What are some of their major wishes for not only the city, but how that works in concert with the state? Because here in Hartford, we have the unique position to be the capital city of the state of Connecticut. So there's a relationship that the city of Hartford has to have with the state and the governor and the state legislature. That being said, what gets me turned up a little bit and also saddens me that we don't have full, robust conversation about the issues and where any candidate, not just the mayor, because we're going to vote for city council as well. That typically that's almost always by assent of the nominee and their slate of officers, of officials. And then right now, the minority party is the Working Families Party here in the city of Hartford. It just is. I would want a more robust conversation about what the issues are. Now, having said that, we in fact have to do the work of really rallying and talking about what those issues are. I think they're no different than in many cities across the state of Connecticut and here and across the country. For example, any of our urban centers, whether that be small towns like Hartford or New Haven or Bridgeport is the largest of our cities. here in the state of Connecticut, or that's Chicago or New York or Los Angeles for that matter. There are issues around, the folk who rally, who live and who are drawn to metropolitan areas, urban centers, and things like housing and schools and roads and public works, policing, fire department. Those are the major issues, because those are in fact the major financial responsibilities of these urban centers. And I have in this cycle not heard very much about any of those kinds of issues. And that, it troubles me. And what do you think, man? How are you hearing? You hear from a different vantage point than me.
Yeah, I think it's been made much easier. Like it's very easy now to run a campaign without campaigning to the people. Obviously, the major campaign, the general election, happens and begins starting Wednesday, right? September 13th is when candidates who are still viable after the primary will have to move their teams into position to message to the entire city. But even with that, I think, again, it's just become much more easy. I think if we look at the mayor's election 8 years ago, public safety was campaigned on really, really heavily, really, really heavily. Schools were campaigned on really heavily. I think that the candidates that are in the race, because I want to make sure I'm touching on as many of the things that you spoke to as I can. I think that some of the candidates in the race haven't thought this all the way through. I think that some of them have. And what I mean by that is, the idea that one of the candidates, if not all of them, but if one of the candidates being a long-term serving member of the DTC, that many people may not have heard of or heard from in the past. I think one thing that that candidate that candidate in particular understood is you got to work the inside, right? You got to work the inside and bring it outside. It's like boxing, and I'm probably, if anybody's watching this that heard me make a boxing analogy over the last 3 weeks, I apologize. I've been making them a lot, and maybe some of the stuff is not like boxing, but I think this is for sure. In the respect that you got to work the inside and work the outside, and this. I mean, even as advocates, we understand that it's an inside-outside game, and there's some candidates that I saw. There's one candidate that I saw, and we talked about this, out working last year, knocking doors, talking to people, connecting. And that showed me that that candidate had the outside game. I haven't seen other candidates do that well. Now, that same candidate is the same candidate who, if anyone out of the ones that I can think of, also served on the DTC for some time, right? So, I like a good candidate. I really appreciate a strong candidate, somebody who's going to work. What I've realized, though, in my time, working formally in politics, is that person and who I think fits the template of being the chief executive of any of the cities that we live in, usually don't match, and actually have not matched yet, right? So I think, I'm openly and admittedly, Bishop said at the beginning, I'm pretty much retired, but I'm openly a campaign operator who's only worked for Black people for the most part, right? If there's like, I have lent some help to other friends or whatever. But so I'm just saying my ethos around my work that I've done has been centered at a place where I think we can do it if we do it together. But the reality has been is the template um, for that kind of candidate, again, usually is not the same as the template that I have in mind, right? Although I have had the pleasure and the luck of working with one, maybe two, definitely two, who had everything that it took, and it's just we didn't get the ball over the line, over the finish line, and I can't blame that on anything but us, right? Our work at the time, but I think you know I've learned to respect a good candidate. Fight them when they're up there if they're doing stuff that I don't like. If they already came up here on some stuff I don't like, fight them, but also respect the fact that they know they did the work. And we've made it so that you can buy a capital city for cheap, for just a few measly bucks and a few votes. You can get a capital city at a low cost. You know, we've seen the same thing happen across the country in other major, what they call majority minority cities like Hartford is, right? Although I hate the term minority in this context, it makes sense. Places like Detroit, uh, uh, um, you know, at a even all throughout PG County in Maryland, right? You have these places that are major majority that the person elected goes outside of the representation of the people. Even in your home, right? If we look at Florissant, um, definitely. I mean, big election out there in 2015. And we thought we knew what the results were going to be, and all the national help came in just so that ultimately the mayor ended up being somebody that didn't represent, at least aesthetically, the template of or the people didn't represent what the people thought they would get. So again, just to summarize that, I respect a good candidate, and I think if we really, really, as advocates, as voters, are serious about getting people who represent us in every way possible, or at least as close to that as we can get, then we gotta think about any 4-year election at least 3 years out, right? You got to start designing and building what those plans are and figuring out what your candidate looks like. And I think there's a lot of organizing that happens before you even find a candidate. And that's something that we haven't done. I have some ideas on why that hasn't happened with any real long lasting effect, any sustainable effect, because I think when we were working Hartford Rising, we had the idea of that being something that could feed that. But I think there's some elements that have to, uh, you know, those who know have to bring into play to begin to set the table, to educate others and build, because it doesn't matter who the chief executive of the city is if the people understand their power. And for the most part, I think you know the people who need the most help, or who could use the most help, are apathetic, dejected, and feel disrespected for the most part by our leaders. And I don't want to be the person to say that we've had bad leaders, but um, we haven't had a united front or even a united back. Something that says, this is who we are, and you know, if we build it, the right candidate will come. Fortunately, unfortunately, whatever, however you want to put it, it's happened the other way around.
Yeah, I'm with you. and I really do understand it. And it's not just Hartford, right? When we look around the state, you've been involved in campaigns across this state, and you've been involved in campaigns locally here. It's surprising to me, and again, and because I've lived in other places, right? It was surprising to me the kind of the kind of apathy that exists. But let me just say, I understand where that comes from. I'm not unawares to the comments that were made. You were involved with the project we worked on, just having political conversation at the barbershop and beauty shops, right? And I can hear the brothers and the sisters, who talk more junk. You don't know no barbershop that they ain't talking junk, right? And it's good junk, but they talking, right? And when you raise up issues, when you say, well, what is it that you actually do think? They may tell you, and it be some good thoughts. But then we go a step further. Or have you registered to vote?
Right.
And the point that you just made, have you participated in any election over say the last 2, 3, 4? Then that number goes down and goes down and goes down and goes down. And I've been, and I've engaged people in the fact that, well-meaning or not, it's great to have an opinion. I want you to have an opinion. And it can be informed or not informed. I want it to be informed, but okay, it can be just your opinion. When you're not willing to put your opinion to the real test, right? Where that opinion may make a difference, right? There was an election of one of our I would say comrades. He won that election with 2 votes. The most, I'll name it, the current Speaker of the House won his state rep election by maybe 4 or 5. It was so few votes.
Right? I think it was like 5 or 6.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 4 or 5 or 6. So these elections are very important, and they're hotly contested. They are. It is where the rubber really, literally meets the road. I say to people all the time, yes, I'm concerned about who's running for president, and we'll participate in the national election and the presidential election next year. Lord, allow me to live. I'll be right there in it. I'll participate in it. And yet, the elections that are probably the most important, where I feel it day for day, are in these municipal elections. Absolutely. The elections that are right in your own hometown.
Absolutely.
Who picks up your garbage has something to do with the policies that are enacted by the mayor and your town council. Who's the chief executive of the school board, or police chief, or fire chief? That all comes down to who's the mayor and who is the town council, around which budgets are built so that they affect our day-to-day. I lived in Chicago for a while, and there was a whole election that was run on, did you remove the snow? And the current that then mayor that did it kind of messed up that job. Now, they didn't mess it up. Their policies messed it up. They got removed out of office. It was just that simple. And so elections they matter. We right now today, for example, have a Supreme Court that is a supermajority tilted in a more conservative political space. Absolutely. That happened because the person who gets to appoint and nominate Supreme Court justices who live out their term for their entire life. Yep. They retire and they step down. is the president of the United States. So those elections have consequences. Now you can say what you want to, and y'all do, especially, some of the people in my family. I ain't talking about your family, Kennard.
No, you're talking about both our families. That's how it works. That's where we at.
They talk good.
Yeah.
And they got lots of opinion, but they don't go voting out in their time. And so I want to encourage folks the best I can, to participate with the understanding that there. I don't even want to say it. There are times in which your kind of candidate may not have gotten to the altar. That's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your person may not have got all the signatures that they needed, and was able to raise all the money. But for the Lord, we can't let just election after election after election after election go by, and then you want to know why you got potholes all up and down your block. Well, that's because there's somebody done crafted some policies. I'm gonna talk about Harper now. I'm getting ready to get right in somebody. I'm gonna probably hurt somebody's feelings, and somebody gonna be mad at me. But for the longest time, the Harper did not have any machine that created the cement to pave a road. We just got that a few years ago. We had to patch the potholes with the stuff. You go to the truck, put it in the ground, they pat it down real good. How many of you know that you get a couple of rains and you hit that thing a couple of times, and all of that they done put in there is out, and that pothole is worse than it was before they filled it.
Yep, that quick tar. In listening to this and thinking about this, I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. I'm just thinking about how emotional electoral politics are, right? When your person doesn't make it to the altar, how quickly and easily it is to become apathetic, how dangerous it is to stake the issues, the policies on one person. You would think almost that if you had a single party system, a single party city, a party dominant municipality, and most of the people are registered to that single party, you would think that the candidates would pretty much be reflective of the electorate, right? The candidates would come from the electoral body, people who represent them, because it's like, how much more close could you get when you have a single party dominant city, right? How close? But it's actually as far from the truth as you could possibly get. And so in thinking about all this and rethinking, like I'd say I've been rethinking some political theory over the last couple of years, because I want to see, and I'm skipping ahead just a little bit to federal elections for next year. And I don't want to talk about who the candidates are or aren't, but I think in this current age of national politics taking on so much of people's attention, and with the cult of personality becoming so much of what we are voting on, as opposed to just 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where, again, like we mentioned earlier, someone 8 years ago in an election here in this city, the person who became mayor campaigned heavily on public safety, campaigned heavily on public education, right? It was the first time this city had ever saw a statewide ad spend for any issues, but those two issues for any campaign, right? So that was relevant at that time in a way that it may not be this go round. At least it doesn't seem like it just yet. And I think with the large cult of personality politics that we're into now, the rock star politics, I'm wondering if the next federal election cycle will bear out some type of understanding on where voters actually are now. right? Because there's an assumption that, or there was an assumption. I think the assumption is getting broken and changed every day, that voters from a particular place vote a particular way. Voters of a particular demographic vote a particular way. And that's been shaken up a lot over the last several years, and even more so. And so, what I'm actually encouraged by, because it's nothing that we can't put the horse back in the stall now, and for all of the animus and the fear that we've had, or many people have had, over what these last federal elections have borne out, I think we may see, or I would, at least, like, I'm encouraged to see what the statistics will be like, what it will look like for, again, new voters, voters of color, voters with disabilities, right? Like, who, recently naturalized voters. What will it look like for them when they go out to the polls next November? And then what will that look like in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 2 years, 3 years in the cities, translating back? Because, I think, as low as the turnout is in Hartford, as apathetic as many people have been for many, many years in cities like Hartford, I think the one thing that I've seen lately is the people, our families, that's running their mouth and got all these opinions. I'm not so sure, but I do know in the last presidential, the turnout was much higher than we thought it would be, right? And so, my thing now, more than anything, because I've been firmly on the left, and that's my orientation, right, for the most part. But I'm excited just a little bit by people who haven't voted voting, even when I don't like it, because there's been some results that I don't like that have actually hurt me. I felt crazy when these things happen, but because they happen, that means that there are some people that believe that they have a bigger piece of the franchise. They own a piece of the franchise. And I think that is something that's been missing for so long, because we kind of been on autopilot, kind of just voting as people say we should vote, or not voting at all. So if there's some new people coming out to the polls, and if there's, people aren't getting this, the people aren't getting the same voter contact as prime voters are, but there's some sort of voter contact now, even in our municipal elections, because we see all the Facebook chatter, we see all the the posts that go up on this site or that site. So the direct engagement that we actually want is a little bit, still lacking, but the education, maybe not on the points that we want, because you said it, I said it, issues are lacking, but that code of personality piece, hate it or love it, has, at least in the last election, got more people out to the polls, and last federal election got more people out to the polls, and maybe that can translate back to the cities in the future. Because if not, then we're gonna keep running into this issue of where it's the best resource, best plan candidate, and we can call candidates months in advance, like we did with the the current Democratic town nominee here in Hartford.
Right. So this is all true. I too have a little bit of excitement, or at least I'm intrigued when new voters are formerly apathetic voters somehow get inspired to do something different. There are ways in which I believe we can encourage that. And what I want, and I speak to it in those of you who follow up the way we've kind of operated in the context of public life, I really do pledge to be engaged in conversations about what the issues are that we are facing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I want solutions, absolutely. And I would love a good, well balanced, thoughtful conversation. Even if there are issues and opinions that I don't share in.
Mm-hmm.
I want a thoughtful, because I really do believe if you come to the party, you come to the event, you come to the conversation, you want it to be better. And
Right.
that I'm a bit of an optimist around that. I know that's kind of pie in the sky and Pollyanna.
No, I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
want to be there, and I believe that you want Hartford, Bridgeport, Waterbury, New Haven, other towns. Don't 169 towns here in Connecticut. I ain't gonna call all of them, but I know
Goshen.
right. You believe in making your town better, right? And
Yeah.
let's have some robust conversation about the real issues,
Yeah.
and not just the okay. You can get on the bandwagon of your favorite one or your pet one, and that's okay. That's good. But there are a full range of decisions. I think for sure people want better quality of life,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
And that centers around jobs and housing and health care. It certainly has something to do with the public safety and how we respond to when they have needs. Those are the conversations that I just don't hear enough of whenever we gather in these places and spaces. And I want to be about, if we can, there are some things that are for our best self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And whoever the we are, we got to figure that out too, right?
Right.
But in these towns that have Black and brown majority populations,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't name it, I'm gonna name it as such. There are Black and brown populations in our urban centers here in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And the 5 top urban centers here in Connecticut all have white male mayors.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all can't make me figure. Y'all gonna have to help me figure that out. And that can't continue. It cannot continue.
Well, we saw New Haven gain this is we're years out from it now, but Tony Harp's reign as mayor, there was respect from all across the board when she made the run, when she got there. I think the unfortunate piece was because there was no structure, because there was no plan, because at least in the way that I see it, there wasn't, to go back and name it the way that I just did not so long ago, people who picked their mayor, right, 3 years out and knew what they were looking for in a mayor versus what person they wanted to point them out to go vote. I think that, it would appear that it imploded. It all imploded because, when you have people on the inside that believe they have more power than the mayor, or people, close to the mayor who want to do things for their own purposes as opposed to what the people want, right? It starts to get complicated. So I think you're right. It just doesn't make sense that these majority minority cities, these Black cities, these brown cities, that have very thin, white populations. I think it's confounding. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But again, the same thing happened in Ferguson right after Mike Brown, right? Right after Mike Brown, even with national research sources. And that was one campaign that I had to skip out on because I was doing an election here. I got drafted to go do that one in Chewy's election in Chicago, and I I said to myself, if I go there and they don't win, I'm gonna be hurt for a while. But I kind of knew that they weren't gonna win because I didn't see or didn't hear anyone thinking outside when I did a couple of the our national teams campaign calls, and it didn't seem like anybody was thinking out much outside of that prime universe, right? These people who have already voted. And even then, when you go outside of that, if your voter identification at a door or on the phone is from people who aren't from where those people are from, right? Because the way, I don't know if your viewers will notice, but I've led some candidates to some wins in some of these cities, and part of the way that I've done it, where I've seen, one small piece of my success working with candidates, because I saw in my first year managing campaigns that other people weren't doing this, and I saw like I had to replace the whole team. Is your frontline troops need to be from your city. they need to know the city better than anybody else, right? Just as well or better than anyone else. And it baffles the mind, but that's often to this day kind of a rarity, right? Because political consultants will bring in their people, or political parties will airdrop their people into the town, but oftentimes you don't have the representation that, not just racially, right? If we go through the whole identity, but someone who's from the neighborhood who knows that the name of the street, if we're talking about a place like Hartford, is Male Avenue and not Mall, right? Someone who knows these in any other case, these narrow parochial things that may not add up on a big stage, but it means everything in that city and to those people. So I think we continue to have white mayors, white male chief executives of cities, partly because of the lack of what we're willing to do, but definitely a large majority or large case. Well, no, let me reverse that. Large cases on us, right? Because ultimately we had the power. Ultimately, I mean, it's stacked against us. It's stacked against us, and the system is rigged. But large case is still on us. I'll put the small piece on them. Them being, the political parties and people who can control small groups of people, relatively small groups of people, to do exactly what they want. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, because the most that I remember in the most recent years is like 8,500. Small group of people.
That's right.
Small group of people. And so I really think coming away from this conversation, once we do step away from it, we got to think about, or at least message out as best possible while we're talking, while we have people's attention. We really got to start taking stock in the next 3 or 4 years or further before we get out and say they did us wrong. Because again, like what I mentioned, those candidates that get out there a few years in advance, and there are these conditional issues that can only be changed every 10 years, like in a place like Hartford, like charter changes, where you got to have, kind of, for the way I think about it, and it could probably, I'm sure it could be done 30 different ways, but the way I think about it is, I got to be talking to you to the point where you understand it as well, if not better than me, when it's time for election day, because you would have told 5 more people or more that I can't access. So me and you, I mean, again, our election day for our big win starts the day after this new mayor gets in, right? But if we're not thinking that way, and we still have to think that while this person is there, we're happy to have them there, whoever they are, right? Because they're our invited guests, and if we didn't show up to invite our guests in, they let themselves in, then that's on us, right? If we didn't show up to let them in, they invited themselves in, that's on us. But while they're here, we got to make sure they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do and more, because what you campaign on is what your vision of the issues, but what you serve on is what the people are actually feeling, what the people are actually experiencing, what the people actually understand, know, and need to push the city forward. So, I think we all have, if we care about these cities that we live in as much as we say when we barbershop talking, as much as we say when we talking to family, we got to start figuring out the ways that we can on the first Wednesday in November, get people together to talk about how we hold this current new incumbent, whatever, new coming person coming in, their feet to the fire, but start building for the next one, the next run. Because if we're not having these kinds of conversations, the day after the election instead of the day before, and after going forward, right, going forward 4 years, then I think the basic candidates that we continue to get, like we have in Hartford right now, will be representative of what people think the town committee wants, and not representative of what the people need.
That's right. We would be remiss. We got just a few more minutes to go. We would be remiss if we didn't just for sake of just we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that we got two of color men running here in Hartford, and one a long time political operative. Who raised a lot of money in his campaign here. In New Haven, the incumbent is running, and there's another person running, and I'm talking Democratic side. Again, in these larger towns, that's what you got. We have an interesting race in the Democratic side in Hamden. There's an African American brother and a woman who's running. Very interesting race there. Bridgeport got an interesting race. The incumbent is running, and a person of color who used to be an insider in the administration of the current mayor,
Charles Gomes.
Yes, and when but Gomes said there was a rumor he was going to run for mayor, and then all of a sudden he don't have no job no more. So it's a very interesting, interesting there. I'll tell you an interesting race that I'm going to pay attention to a little bit is in Middletown. You got the current mayor, who's a young man, progressive, and the former member of the town council and school board member, an African American young man who's running, who I believe had some connection to Q.
Yes.
So, very into that. That's a race I'm gonna pay a little bit of attention to. And of course there are others. I'm just naming some that I know.
I like this part because I want to give some picks too for tomorrow that I'm paying attention to. I think East Hartford is very interesting. East Hartford has not had a black mayor. The two, and this is not actually for tomorrow. It's actually for
the general election
in November. Yes. The two candidates are both black. Republican and a Democrat. So, for a town that's never had that, to them to be pushed so far through the last several elections with many changes happening in their town, I'm really encouraged by that, because East Hartford is not a majority minority city, but it has grown in its diversity over the years. And I think there's a lot of ability with the income that they have there, the job base that's there for them to do well. Another really interesting race to me tomorrow actually the most interesting for me tomorrow is Bloomfield.
Yes. I was gonna mention Bloomfield too. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm I have personal and professional reasons why Bloomfield is interesting to me. The first personal reason is I did manage members of one of the two slates. Actually, you know what? I managed members of both of the slates when they were one slate, 2017. And with that particular campaign, what I said to members of Slate was, you know, Bloomfield is a bastion. I'm gonna stay on it, but Bloomfield is a bastion of Black folks. Um, Not too many places quite like it, and I wanted to see a slate that was majority Black, and neither slate. Well, the slate that I was working with at the time pushed back heavily. Two people pushed back pretty heavily. Well, four people. Two people stood with me, and four pushed back pretty heavily. I'm happy to see the two people who didn't push back so heavily on a slate that is majority Black. Actually, both the slates have one token white person on them, and they're all, So that warms my heart. I'll let it be known. I'm pushing for row A. For the simple fact, and I actually I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I shouldn't say that. I'm picking sides because I was discriminated against some of the people on the other slate. So this is personal. This is personal for me. And then finally, I think Bridgeport is interesting, just in the respects of, I think there's four things happening there. There's, the new guard is coming in through Lamont Daniels, and I don't know, how likely it is for him or not, but he's there. You have someone who I would call Lamont's, his analog, but his senior there in Marilyn Moore. And I think they carry much of the same ethos. So it's challenging seeing them both in the same race, but I think they care about the good of the people. And then you have John Gomes, who's been, active in Bridgeport politics for a long time, a Bridgeport business owner. He's from a well-known Cape Verdean family, which in Connecticut, that's not like Bridgeport is more. I see much more. Yeah, all our cities are diverse, but Bridgeport has so many different pockets of populations that matter. That John Gomes's shot this time is probably his best shot. And then with Ganem, this is the old guard that came back in to usher itself in after, however many years or whatever. But with having three candidates of color that are all viable, regardless of who wins or loses in this race, the first time Bridgeport had anything like that, a viable candidate of color in 40 years was his last race. So to now have three viable candidates of color, and I've watched all these races where Bridgeport was a place where people of color were afraid to run, essentially.
Yes.
So to have three viable candidates of color now, I think it may say a lot for the future. I think a lot of these races, to be totally honest, are foregone conclusions. But I think there's a lot of good things happening, a lot to look out for tomorrow. I can't wait to catch up on the results of these races.
That's right. We're gonna chop it up some more, Brother Kennard. I much love and respect to you. Your willingness to be in this conversation. I appreciate all of you who have watched and paid attention. Brother Wade, we come into Waterbury. We're going to talk about it. Waterbury is a very interesting political spot, and let's put some pressure on it a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the goings on in some of these spaces, and do a bit of storytelling about how this stuff works.
Important.
that doesn't
That's important.
yeah, that doesn't necessarily get lifted up. And I promise you, we'll come back. We're going to come back and talk some more. We're going to talk about what are some of the issues that are pressing us here. New England is a very interesting place, and in many ways we have led not only the region but the country, quite frankly, in some rather hefty issues like gun legislation, police accountability. We're leading the country, and around around reproductive health rights and justice. There are ways in which we are engaging in conversations and having full-throated conversations, and I want to be in those conversations. I want to be lifting up the voices and the concerns of the folk, the true blue folk, and I know your heart. I know you will too. Thank you, brother, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This is absolutely really good, and I appreciate all of you all for paying attention. Those of you who are with us live, and those of you who will rewatch this, I appreciate it very much. We're gonna see you this time again next week. God, listen, my people would say, if the Lord says the same, and the creek don't rise. I don't know what the difference is between the creek rising and the Lord, but anyway, that's that's kind of what they say. That's what they would say. I appreciate you. Appreciate all of you. We'll talk to you again. God bless. God bless. Take care. Peace.